Welcome to Adventures in Life. I'm your host, Earl Beecher. My co-host, Elizabeth Calder, called me and she said, Earl, you should interview Peggy Van Pelt. And I said, why should I? And she said, because she's very creative. I said, well, that's a plus. And she worked with Disney. I said, oh, I'd love to interview Peggy. Peggy, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
It's nice to have you here.
I'm glad
and
to be here.
The Disney name, I think, has become the biggest name in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
Who would think a cartoonist would be a bigger name than Clark Gable or Harrison Ford? Amazing, isn't it?
Oh, it is.
What happens?
It is.
They took over other studios. They took over ABC. It is the biggest name.
Mm-hmm.
I want to just say one thing. When Mayor Yorty, a few years ago, went to South America, he came back, and he said, nobody down there has ever heard of Los Angeles, but they've all heard of Disneyland.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I always,
It's true.
you have to admire that. So tell me about your connection with Disney.
Oh, well, I had the wonderful opportunity to work at Walt Disney Imagineering for quite a number of years. And then most recently, by the way, Walt Disney Imagineering is the company that makes and builds, constructs, designs all the theme parks. They build the ships, the cruise lines, design those as well, and some of the hotels they do. And it was wonderful having the opportunity to work there as an artist and in some of the other areas in talent development and so forth. But now I'm working for Disney Editions. Now they are the publishers for the Disney company, and they are writing some wonderful books about Imagineering.
I see you brought some.
I did.
You've got one here, Designing Disney?
Yes, Designing Disney. This was written with John Hench, who is a Disney legend, 95 years old when he wrote that book. Came to work every day, and he was mentor to all of us and established some of the design principles that we work with. He was also Walt's right-hand man when it came to design.
Is it his picture here?
Yeah. Yeah,
I don't know if the camera can pick up his picture right up here.
yeah, that's with Walt.
I'll hold it maybe
Yeah.
so that Jeremy can focus in on it here. Well, you know, it is so exciting to meet somebody who's in the inner circle of the Imagineering division
Yes.
and the Additions
Yes.
division. So you have two.
Right.
Now, you're going to talk to us today about the Imagineering way, and it says ideas to ignite your creativity.
Yes, that's true.
How many Imagineers does it take to change a light bulb?
Does it have to be a light bulb?
I never thought of it that way.
Well, we ask a lot of questions. And creative people do. That's one of the things that creative people love to ask questions.
This is what we talk about as a think tank.
In a way, yes, it's definitely, it has all the trappings of a think tank, definitely.
And this one says, putting your talent to work.
Yes, that was my first book, and I wrote that with Lucia Capacchione.
I see your name right down here. It says PhD afterwards.
Yes, I got one of those. Yes,
They're not easy to get.
No, I had to work really hard, but I had a wonderful board, and I chose my school based on the board because I really I got it in the psychology of creative expression.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
it's
when I
the
did my work at
philosophy thing.
UCLA, it was in finance, which leads me to something I wanted to bring up.
Oh, yes. Okay. I like this.
Now, when it comes to Imagineering, Walt Disney is given the credit for thinking up all these things.
That's true.
But I've always wanted to ask somebody who knew. Roy was the finance man.
Yes.
He would take Walt's ideas and bring them to reality. Now, I think that's as big a gift as dreaming them up in the first place, isn't it?
Well, it is. Now, the reality that Roy brought to the table was the financial reality. He was able to figure out how to finance these things. And he and Walt had a terrific relationship because both of them understood that in order to get an idea out of the head and to get it down on paper, to get the models built of it,
and the buildings built,
took an enormous amount of money, an enormous amount of talent, and it took time. So Roy, now the story I'm about to tell you is hearsay, because I haven't heard Roy say this myself, but John Hench has told me these stories, and they're in this particular book as well. Roy wanted to be debt-free. That was one of his goals as a financial person.
Amen.
Amen.
I'll second that one.
Exactly. And the minute he would get debt-free, or close to it, not debt-free, but the minute he would get close to it, Walt would come to him and say, look, we have this, we're doing these short cartoons. I want to do a feature-length cartoon. And Roy would go, but why do you want to do that?
Yeah, who'd be interested in a
Exactly.
full-length cartoon?
Right, exactly. Well, enough people were that they eventually had a full studio doing just that work. And so just about the time Roy thought, we've made it, Walt came along and said, let's
Time
do
to
Disneyland.
breathe.
No time to breathe. Let's do Disneyland. So
Disneyland.
Disneyland.
What's that?
Right.
We're in the cartoon business.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. So this is the way Walt and Roy worked together. And I will say that when Walt Disney World opened, Walt Disney had passed away, but his brother Walt opened. Roy opened Walt Disney World, and they were essentially debt-free at that point. And when John Hench asked Roy about why he had done it, he said, well, because if I hadn't have opened this park, the next time I met Walt, he would be really mad at me. So he did it, but he understood how to say to Walt, look, here is the downside of doing it. This is all the debt we're going to incur.
We're going to go bankrupt,
right.
Walt.
We are. But this is how you can do it. So from the financial side, he told Walt how he could do things. And then Walt gathered around him extraordinary talent, like John Hench, who were able to take those visions and dreams and make them into reality.
Yes.
And John is a wonderful role model for that, because he not only had big ideas, but he had the skill and capability of making them visual. In other words, he could draw what he was thinking. He could write.
He could put it down on paper,
write
it, and sketch it.
Right, and then he could take it one step further. And that further step was, he knew how to actually build things. And there's some wonderful stories.
Architect?
Oh, yes. Like, you know, when he went to build Space Mountain, to design it, Walt had told John, I want this to be the first roller coaster ride in the dark. And I want images on the ceiling. So, special effects, okay? And he also wanted, by the way, the car to have music, so that the track, the music would be timed together. So you'd move to the music. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Talk about atmosphere, influence,
exactly.
The feeling, the emotion.
Absolutely, all there. So what Walt said to the engineers when he saw the building and the slope of it, and the fact that the inside structural beams were going to be actually inside the building, as they should be, he said, what if you put those beams on the outside of the building? And they went, we usually put them on the inside. And he said, think about putting them on the outside. And so what you get are these gorgeous decorative beams that serve as a design element that are on the outside of the building, and at the same time on the inside
you have more space.
You've got exactly, and the flat surface with which to project your images on. The only thing they didn't get out of that ride was the music, because the technology wasn't there yet. But they have it down at Disney's California at the roller coaster there.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see.
So John was able to think through how to build things, and he had the patience, and he had the principles, which is what this book is all about, with which to be, the design principles, and he also had ethical principles too. But anyway, it was the design principles to move the design clear through to opening day, and then to live with it. day in, day out, because you know we have to do that.
Yes. Oh, and it has to be safety.
It has to be pristine.
Put people through it, crowd management, everything. Oh, it
Yeah.
takes a lot of
It does, and it takes many different kinds of this.
to get outside the box.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And sometimes inside the box, too. Sometimes the problems we have to solve are so laden with criteria because of the nature of them. You know, when I think of out of the box, or excuse me, in the box thinking, what comes to mind is that scene in Apollo 13 when they discover they have a problem and they only have X number of hours and minutes to figure it out, and they dump out onto the table about 12, 15 items, and they say, okay guys, you've got to fix the air problem that these guys have. I believe it was an air problem. You've got to fix it, and this is all you have to work with. Well,
wow.
I mean, that kind of creativity.
That's pressure.
That's pressure. That was life and death.
That is pressure.
And they brought those guys down safely. Well, to me, that's one of the finest examples of in-the-box thinking for creativity. But sometimes, you know, we're challenged with outside of the box.
We'll get back to that in just a
Okay.
second. It's time for a public
Okay,
service announcement.
great.
So stay with us. We'll be welcome back, where our guest is Peggy Van Pelt. Peggy, you were talking about some of the people, John Hinch and others.
Yes.
I taught many years at Cal State Long Beach, and there was a graduate of ours, I think Tony Baxter.
Yes, that's correct.
And I attended a seminar one night that he gave where he was talking about planning Tomorrowland.
Right.
And since Space Mountain is there, you were right in the neighborhood, I guess.
Well, exactly. See, one of the things, talk about in-the-box thinking. When you have a land that's already established, you have your box. Like Tomorrowland is already established. So what are you going to change out within Tomorrowland to keep the product alive?
It takes constant change to re-attract the Southern California
That's
audience. I was told that by another student of mine who worked over there for many years.
Well, that's true, because essentially what the parks, for me, really are, it's a walk through an art form. It's a walk through creativity. It's a walk through a film becoming a three-dimensional environment that you can walk through. I mean, it's living in the creation of so many people, and it's so artfully done. And Disney, people like Tony Baxter at Imagineering are responsible for that artfulness. So you have to keep it fresh. There's no other way to do it.
Well, I go to Disneyland every week under my doctor's orders. I told you about this.
Right, I love that.
Anyway, I think the flowers and the music set it apart. There is the design of the park itself with the flowers and the music are just gorgeous.
Well, it is. And
if you turned off the music or something, or if the flowers weren't kept fresh the way they are, they change them a lot.
Oh, they do.
It could look run down in a hurry.
Oh, absolutely. But it's about the vitality of living things, and music in its own way is a living art form. And people can relate to it very easily. But one of the principles that we design to is what makes people comfortable and liking people. And one of the things that I think helps young designers, even if you're not with Disney, is if you like the people you're designing for, then you're going to go a step further.
In other words,
them.
relate to your audience.
Relate to your audience, and always consider if you've got an idea and you want to make that idea real. Now, who are you making that idea real for? Now, if it's for you, that's terrific, because then you are your own audience. But if it's something that you want other people to enjoy, then what you have to think about is who are those other people, and what stories are you trying to communicate to them in terms of your idea.
Now, you phrased it as stories.
I did. I did. The reason I did that is because I have this notion that we teach ourselves to think in terms of story. And I read this in The Tipping Point, which is a book, an advertising book that's out. And in the book, they talk about a project that was done, a research project that was done with 2- and 3-year-olds who taught themselves by telling themselves story. And see, what we use story for is an organizing principle, because if you know what your story is, you know how to organize the events that will take place in your story. So if your story is...
all the pieces tend to fall into a place.
That's right.
And organize around the narrative.
Around the narrative, that's exactly right. So if you're telling a joyful story, then you won't want a horror figure in there necessarily, unless it's to produce some kind of joy, even if you love the horror figure. You know?
Okay, the Wicked Witch.
Well, yeah, now she works beautifully, well, because she enhances the story there.
Oh yeah, usually
Yeah.
the villain's the protagonist in every major story.
Well,
I
you
know.
have to have a villain, yes, in most of your stories. This
Yes.
is true, because people love that.
Oh yes.
But we communicate in terms of story all the time. When somebody comes home at the end of the day,
How was your day?
how was your day? That's the first question you ask them. Or the other line I love is, you won't believe what happened today. And then the story
Oh, that
comes
opens
out.
it up
That
right
opens
there.
it up. So we communicate with story, and that comes out of our imagination.
How does it feel to sit in with names that have become legendary in a think tank and start communicating and thinking? Are there any rules, or is it the fact that no idea is rejected, it can be as wild, or how is it structured, if at all?
Okay, one of the things that happens at Imagineering is, and any company where a lot of brainstorming is done, is that I think the rules are second nature. The rules really are, every idea is a good idea. That's the first rule.
No such thing as a bad idea.
No such thing as a bad idea, and this is why. Because you know that there are ideas that are less important, but all ideas are connected. So you may have to get out 5 or 6 ideas that aren't quite as good as that brilliant gem that pops out, number 7. Or maybe it's number 100 that pops out. Or maybe it was number 1 that popped out.
And one person's idea triggers the other.
One person's idea triggers the other, and there's a fluid exchange around the room. There's a lot of laughter, there's a lot of shouting, but it's not at each other. It's just people interrupting each other because they're so excited about what they're saying.
That must be fun.
Well, it is. And then there's this very quiet component that exists. These are the people that sit back and they listen and they take everything up, and at first you don't think they're doing anything. They go back to their offices, and within hours they start barraging you with some of the most brilliant thinking. They have a different style. Their style is not as extroverted. They're a little more introverted, you know. And in the Imagineering way, we talk about this because there are over 78 authors that contributed to the Imagineering way.
I can hardly wait to read it.
Yeah, exactly. And what it is their opinions on what creativity is, on what imagination is, on how it works for them. And we are currently doing a sequel to this, and that's the one I'm helping with, which is the little exercises, the little things they do to stay sharp. And I was amazed at the number of Imagineers that just fill their heads with the problem right before they go to bed, put a pencil and paper by the bed, and when they wake up in the middle of the night, they start writing. Now, all of them tell me you have to have a flashlight, or you get gobbledygook because you wake up the next morning and you
Can't
go,
read it.
what is this? Yeah. And while they're driving, they get a lot of good ideas while they're driving. And this is not to say that they're not paying attention to their driving. They are. But for some reason, paying attention and focusing while you're writing or driving rather, what that seems to do is it seems to release whatever else is going on in the brain, and little ideas will pop in. I know when they do for me, I pull over and I write them down, is the way I do it.
What you're describing just sounds wonderful. I'll tell you an experience I had.
Okay.
I love to get together with people and just start working ideas. And I was working at the research department at the head office of Security Pacific National Bank. And I had cornered John, and I was trying to do this. A little while later, the boss walks over and says, "What are you badgering John for?" I wasn't badgering. What's wrong? You know, and I was trying to share ideas and get him not in that environment.
Well, no, some environments are not conducive to that, but let me explain to you that when it comes to actually having ideas, a lot of us have to get up and move. We have to get up and move and go engage with someone else. Or we have to get up and go do the dishes. Or we have to go for a walk.
Let it gel a little bit.
That's exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
And you know this whole idea of procrastination?
I
think we ought to look at that. I really do, because I'm not sure it's procrastination. I think what happens is that when we ask this marvelous brain, mind, computer, imagination thing that we work with here, when we ask it to come up with a solution, it takes it a while. And it just won't toss that idea up until it's ready. So that's when we start thinking it's getting, 2 weeks from the deadline. 1 week from the deadline. Pressure, and then poof, there it is. But it keeps working, because haven't you had some of the best ideas after the deadline?
Unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. So what we want to try and encourage people to do is to learn how to manage a little bit their own processes so that they can maybe have some of those better ideas before the deadline. But the truth of the matter is that the machine up here, I don't think turns off. I think once you give it an instruction, once you give it an instruction to find a solution, it goes after it.
Right.
Yeah.
We have to pause.
Okay.
Another public service announcement. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Peggy Van Pelt. Welcome back. Our guest is Peggy Van Pelt, who was with the Imagineering Division, and now with the Additions.
Yes,
and so you're concentrating more on the writing of the books now.
Yes, right.
Do you miss the other?
In a way, I do. I always threaten that when I retire, I'll go back to the model shop or into the production area, either one, and build models or paint the figures and paint the sets. That part of it I miss.
I should think designing a character, Mickey Mouse, of course, the classic example, but designing a Donald Duck or the Seven Dwarfs, the different personalities, that's what made it.
Oh, yeah.
If they'd all been just nondescript little men, I mean...
No, they wouldn't have gone far, I'm afraid. But we have wonderful designers.
Yes. Who are some of the ones that stand out?
Well, we had been talking about Tony Baxter. He certainly is a wonderful designer, but there's people like Barry Braverman and Tim Delaney, Rick Rothschild. These are people that are able to hold a vision and work with others to be able to realize that vision. And they're of my generation within the company. We have recently lost John Hench, who was the last of the original people to work with Walt. So he was our last connection to Walt. Now we have Marty Sklar, who's the head of the company now. He too worked for Walt. But in terms of the artists, we don't have anyone left that works with us. So it's truly my generation that has taken over. And we are people who are determined to make sure that those principles are kept in place, because we're considered the old timers.
Oh, I know, I hate it. I get it all the time.
I know.
You know, the Disney name is magic. It is magic, and I'm very anxious that when the Disney name is on it, I know it's family values and quality, that it's not going to suddenly have something that they did that, you know. And I think that the public tends to hold that responsibility over their heads.
Well, and it's a wonderful responsibility to have held over your head.
It is. There aren't many places you can go where you can really trust people to do your grandchildren right. I want to know, where can our viewers get these?
Amazon.com has all of them, and at a very good price.
Amazon.com has the Imagineering Way, putting your talent to work, and designing Disney.
That's right.
Oh, Peggy, it's been such a delight to get acquainted with you
Well,
and
thank
to
you.
meet somebody who's been on the inside. You know, that's fun. Thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about creativity.
I'll have you back sometime.
Okay, good. It's a
And,
deal.
and I want to thank our viewers for joining us, and please join us soon again for more adventures in life.